Hello, folks. Welcome to Jeff and Axe Horror Show. I'm Jeff.
I'm Axe.
And Axe, we have a pretty special show today. And I feel that this might not be the last of these specific person here that we're going to be talking about today in his films. But, got to start somewhere. And we don't often do this, Axe, but we actually have 4 features this time. So really more bang for your buck on the show today. Definitely excited about these films, and they couldn't be more different. These films, we have a werewolf film, we have a vampire film, we have a strange film that I don't really even know how to describe it, and then we have kind of a modern retelling of a American classic, basically, is how I would describe the other one. But so we're going to start with our first one, Axe, and that is from 1985. This is our oldest one, and it's the movie Silver Bullet. And Axe, this was based on the novella Cycle of the Werewolf. And a little thing about this film before we talk about really what it's about. The original director for this was Don Coscarelli, he's known, people recognize him from Phantasm, Bubba Hotep, those films. I read something online, Axe, that it was because of the actual werewolf scenes that the new director, David Addis, was brought in, because I guess Don Coscarelli had kind of an issue with the werewolf, maybe the way the werewolf looked in Silver Bullet. Obviously, you can tell that there is 2 different costumes here, because of the shadowing of the werewolf in certain scenes. There is the scene where the shadow looks, when you look at specifically the werewolf's face, because there's the scene where the werewolf kind of doesn't really have a lot of hair on the
on the nose.
The nose, yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting that this film, kind of went through a lot of crap before it even got made. And, obviously dealing with different directors and a pretty good cast too. But this film it takes place in the fictional town of Tarker Mills. And it's kind of centers around this girl and her little brother. And her little brother, of course, is played by Corey Haim. And one thing about Corey Haim here is, this is definitely really like setting the tone, I think, Axe, for Corey Haim's future career in horror specifically. This is a movie that definitely, you can see that Lost Boys swagger a little bit, developing in this.
Yeah, well, obviously Feldman had Haim beat as far as horror movies go. But this, next to Lost Boys, this is definitely Corey's,
It's his calling card.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. It's definitely, what, other than some, a very obscure...
Dream Another Dream or whatever
that
shit was.
Right.
Yeah.
Some very obscure 80s films, because obviously there was some 80s films that the 2 of them were in that were non-horror, that kind of, were, I don't know, I want to say flops, but they were...
I wonder how many people only knew about Corey Haim because of the show, The Two Coreys.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people, honestly.
Isn't that sad?
It really is.
Poor sad Corey Haim.
Yeah. He's,
Rest in peace, buddy.
seriously, it's unfortunate, Axe, because there's no doubt about it. He was always overshadowed by Feldman.
Yeah.
And obviously, we won't get into that. But the whole thing about, as Feldman has kind of came back into the limelight with the whole sexual allegations deal, and there's a lot of
Yeah, I'm sure Corey Haim would have been, just super proud of Corey Feldman for coming out with the story and everything. And
Absolutely.
I know they were both probably traumatized as children. So, yeah, that's going to be a big victory for all those people in Hollywood that grew up with that awful stuff.
Right. But back to the film here. So this, Silver Bullet Axe kind of, takes place in this, of course, northeastern town, and there's this one thing about this town, Axe, I will say, is, obviously Stephen King writes these fictional towns, they're a lot of them are eerily similar, but I feel like this one is a little bit different because this town really turns a blind eye to everything, absolutely everything. And
well, they do the same in Derry. All of his shit is all within a state of each other.
Right.
It's all very supposed to be very close, like a jog from Salem's Lot to Derry to all these different places. It's all Castle Rock. It's all Maine pretty much. Besides Vermont, is The Shining and
yeah. But yeah, I mean it's just there's something about this town, they're very they're really, because Marty is Corey Haim's character, and he's really just, it seems like he's really trying to convince these people of what's going on, and everybody's just this is not in our town, and
so let's mention that the main character of this movie is in a wheelchair. So for people with disabilities, people that are in wheelchairs, when this movie came out, I'm sure were just in love with this whole story, and I really think that for its time, it's I remember being a kid and watching this movie and thinking it was cool, and I can only imagine a kid that, I had a friend that was in a wheelchair when I was younger, and I'm sure he would have loved watching this movie, especially when Gary Busey gives him the souped up one, towards the end, he just takes off flying, that's awesome, it's every crippled kid's dream pretty much, it's wow. It's I really like movies that, we've talked about this before, but there's something really endearing about child actors. You just feel so much more for their safety, for their, you care more about the character, I think, when it's a child. And so to me, I mean, this movie, it is really aimed towards kids. I really think this movie is supposed to be a kids movie. But it does deliver on the blood. It's got the blood and the special effects and stuff in it. But it doesn't have any of the, sex and the stuff like that too much in it,
Mm-hmm.
So it's really more of a kid-friendly kind of movie, and you have kids actors in it, and so it's one of those ones where a lot of kids get to watch this one at an earlier age than some of the other movies. People that I've talked to,
Mm-hmm.
This was one of the first ones they saw because it, had kids and stuff.
Yeah, exactly, Ax. And to reiterate on the acting a little bit, you mentioned Gary Busey. He plays Uncle Red in this, and he's very Gary Busey in this film throughout this.
Fucking love Gary Busey.
Throughout this whole fucking film, and it's almost like they just kind of put a camera in front of Gary Busey and just said, "Can you just be Gary Busey for 2 hours?" And it's just he has some pretty ridiculous moments, but the acting in this acts is very for me it's very hit or miss. I think that there is some there's definitely some good actors and actresses in this film. Like obviously the main cast is pretty stellar, but the some of the supporting cast, the acting is a little over the top. Like the bald guy that gets his son ends up getting killed. And he's just, just the overreaction of this guy. Like don't get me wrong, I don't have kids, but if they got one of them got killed, I don't think I would act like Will Ferrell, like I just think that he was a little over the top, but a little ridiculous. But other than that, there's some fun moments of this, and I definitely agree with you, Ax. I think this is more lighthearted than a lot of these. Actually, the other 3 films that we're going to talk about today. Silver Bullet is the most lighthearted of all of them.
Yeah, and the way that it's narrated, it feels a lot like The Golden Years, or like A Christmas Story, or something along those lines. With the narration throughout it.
Yep, it definitely has that feel, and that's another. Axe brought up The Golden Years. That's another interesting Stephen King,
Yeah.
adaptation. It's a lot of people, you either like that one or you don't. And I kind of feel that way with Silver Bullet. It's definitely a movie that
I said Golden Years. I meant Wonder Years. The show Wonder Years.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah. Well,
close enough.
Yeah.
You get the idea. But Axe, there's, like I said, there's definitely some moments in this. One of my personal favorite moments is, because obviously he's very disappointed he can't go to the fireworks show, and then he ends up blowing a fucking firework in the wolf's eye, and it sets up this crazy sequence, where. Sorry, folks. If you haven't seen Silver Bullet by now, I'm gonna spoil it for you. But his sister, runs into the. One thing I will say about this, actually, really, and I forgot to mention this, but is the importance of the character of the priest, because we really learn early on in this film that the priest is a werewolf.
Yeah. Like
it's pretty blatantly obvious, and they don't try to hide it.
Right. Part of the story is how he's handling it. The guilt and the shame that he feels from it, and the fear that he has of getting caught, and all of that, and the building tension because he knows that she knows that she knows, And,
exactly.
And just to shoot a firework off in a fucking werewolf's eye is like I'm saying, man, when you're 10 years old, that's the shit, man.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's really, it's really cool. And it's a great moment in the film. But Terry O'Quinn is, he plays the sheriff in this. And he's another actor that, he plays a pretty good sheriff in this. Because what Stephen King film, doesn't have a sheriff. You got to have a.
I really like the relationship between the brother and the sister, She starts off, he's always such a booger. And, I guess, I don't know, I have sisters, and so I can relate, I guess, a little, but I really like the scene where, him and his really fucking demented friend are gonna pull a prank on her with the snake, in the tree, and then she falls in the mud, and he goes and he gives her the money that he's got saved up to replace her pantyhose, and that whole scene I thought was really touching. Brother and sister scene, like I really felt like it's like, he looked like he was truly sorry, when he played that part. He really sold it. And I don't know, it's just really touching. And like I said, it really adds to the how invested you get in the movie when you're watching it, because you really care about these people.
Yeah, definitely. And it's I enjoyed watching it. It's been a while since I had checked it out, but it was nice to revisit it. And
and Gary Busey, man, he is just a riot, and like all of his one-liners and shit in this movie, like the joke when why does he call you an asshole? Hee haw, hee haw. He always calls me that, And what's that other one where he's like, I'm too old to be playing Hardy Boys, meet Reverend Werewolf, And like he probably does just riff that shit. You're right, like.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's that's the type of actor that Gary Busey is, and it's overall I think it's a pretty entertaining film. That's really what I got to say about Silver Bullet. So Axe, I will let you start it off for the ratings here.
It's hard to rate this. Like I'm probably gonna give it a 3 blood drops, but it's, I guess, anywhere between 2.5 and 3. It's certainly not like the best or nothing. Like it's not, like as far as werewolf movies, it's not necessarily The Howling at all. But it's memorable. So I'm gonna give it a 3.
Okay. I think, well, I mean, you bring up an interesting point, X. That I don't think you definitely can't compare it to a movie like The Howling, but even a movie like An American Werewolf in London, this is not, I don't know if it's even on that level. But I just think that it's definitely an enjoyable film. It's fun. So I'm gonna go 3 as well. 3 blood drops as well, X. I think that it's one of those films that keeps your interest just enough that, you can definitely make it to the end. And it's, as we have stressed already, that it's definitely more for the family. And it's definitely something that you can sit down with the kids and watch. And so there you have it. 1980.
Well, before we move on so quick, though, I would like to say that I really love the kill scene of the woman who's killing herself, who's taking the pills, and he crashes through the window, right? That part, I think, that's probably the scariest part of the movie. The end, it's, a guy in a suit,
Right. In a subpar suit, because let's face it, the werewolf suit is not spectacular. It's really not.
No, I mean, it's not the worst I've seen.
No, of course not. But it's definitely not a, for the, I think what they had to work with, I think they could have done a little bit better in certain areas.
Yeah.
And I think the werewolf suit was a big focal point that they really should have focused on, because this is a werewolf film. So you need to have a,
right, when they left him in the shadows, it worked better.
Absolutely. Definitely. It looked a lot better. But yeah, so I mean, that kind of wraps that up. So that being said, Axe and I have both agreed on 1985's Silver Bullet. We are going to go with 3 blood drops out of 5. So that brings us to our next film, Axe, which is from 1997. We're kind of jumping around here a little bit because our next film that we're going to do after this one is actually older than this film, but there's a little reason for that. So this film, Axe, is from 1997, and it is The Night Flier, and it is directed by Mark Pavia. And I will say this on record, Axe, that The Night Flier is probably, in my opinion, probably Stephen King's most underrated work. I think that this film is... this story is just so... it's different. It's a vampire story, but it's very... there's just something appealing about it. And this is a film that I think has really skipped a lot of people's radars. I don't think... if you're a diehard Stephen King fan, you probably haven't missed this one. But for somebody that would be a casual fan, I feel like this one could easily be skipped over for some other ones.
Yeah.
A couple of real quick fact about this, Axe. This was originally produced for HBO. So this was, kind of definitely has that made-for-TV movie feel to it. Like a lot of Stephen King's films do. And it's about this guy that is a tabloid reporter, and he follows this vampire around. And, he's just trying to get to know this vampire, and this vampire is just not having it. And Miguel Ferrer plays the vampire, and he is known for, of course, Twin Peaks, which a lot of people know, Twin Peaks. And he kind of, that's what it kind of focuses on, him, traveling around by plane and just trying to stay with this vampire as he's doing all these, dastardly things. And, he's this whole movie, Axe, he's trying to get this guy to show his face, show your face, and all this. And there's obviously a whole sequence, about it. But it's... I will say I don't think it's perfect. It's not a perfect film, but there's definitely something about it that I really enjoyed revisiting. This was one of those movies, Axe, that this was actually one of the first Stephen King films that I ever saw. This was probably my order was probably Salem's Lot, like The Shining, the Tommyknockers, It, and then The Night Flier.
Right.
So I really, and then of course you throw Cujo in there somewhere too, but this was an early film that I really, really grasped onto, and I was, I don't think the story is fantastic, and I think there's some really loose ends to it also. One of them being the tabloid reporter's boss, because we see him in a couple of scenes, and then he has that really awkward scene where he's kind of laughing maniacally, and then
I love that scene.
And then you don't see him anymore.
I relate to that guy so hardcore.
Me too. Absolutely.
Okay, so here's my take on this movie. Okay? This movie is not about a vampire. Okay? This movie is not even about one guy going crazy. This movie was actually like Stephen King taking a crack at all of the cheesy tabloid shit that's out there, and fucking reporters and paparazzi and all of that shit that shit peddlers. Okay? This movie was a smear at shit peddlers. And but does it in like a laughable way to where, you know, even though this is the way it is, it's still funny, isn't it? You know, and so it's like the crude inhumanism throughout the whole thing, where, you know, this guy is so cold that it does, you know, he can get a shot of anything and it doesn't move him. That stone cold media, you know, the stone cold media, man, and what people want to buy, you know, and get their greasy fingers on, and what lengths people go to acquire these things, right? And that's a big focal point, is like, he gets haunted, like, do you know what I had to do to get that shot, you know? And so, yeah, and then, like, all of these dreadful stories that he's done throughout his life just kind of haunt him and turn him into a different person. But yeah, like, the dude that's, like, behind the scenes, that's just plotting all of this, you know, the boss, he's like, you know, he's an important character, but he's kind of like, he's Stephen King, and he's the devil, and he's whatever you want to put, he's the one that's pulling the strings.
He's the puppet master.
Yeah, like, he sets the whole thing up, tells him about it and everything, and then sends the girl after him, and all of that shit. And he just, like, that laugh, that maniacal laugh that you mentioned, is like him just knowing exactly how this is going to play out, you know, and that it's money in the bank for him.
Right.
You know, the fallout.
Right. But you know, my only gripe is obviously is, you know, because he was such a strong character, it just kind of seemed like his role was kind of more or less cut short. You know, it was very like, it seems like he could have had something in the meat of the story, which, like you said, it when you look at it that way, actually, you know, the whole story centers around this guy.
Yeah.
And so that was my only real thing, is if you're going to have this guy be the focal point of the story, you know, you definitely, I think you just can't have him in a loose end like you did. You know, it kind of, like, as much as we both enjoyed that scene, you know, with that scene, you're craving more of that guy.
And then that's it, yeah.
Right. So it's very like...
Yeah, I totally agree. They should have hinted that he knew more than he did, or...
Exactly.
They should have took it a little bit further than...
Just something subtle. That's all we were asking for, really, there. You know. But other than that, though, you know, I think, Axe, that this film is, you know, it's a fun film. That's a good way of describing it. It's fun. It's not, you know, it's not knock it out of the park great. You know, because I don't think the writing is, you know, even though we're talking Stephen King here, you know, Stephen King has his faults. And I don't think that, you know, the writing is as strong as some of the other works, but there's just, you know, there's something appealing about it, and it's, you know, it's definitely a fun film. But one of the things that I really think makes it, you know, so fun is obviously, and I misspoke earlier. I said that he doesn't play the vampire. He plays Richard Dees as the Miguel Ferrer from... that's what I meant to say, but people get the idea. We screw up on the show once in a while, but you know, Miguel Ferrer's character in this, you know, he's just so, like, this guy is so like entrenched in this world of being a tabloid reporter, you know, and I absolutely love some of his quotes in this. And obviously one of the best quotes in this was, he's sitting there and he says, "Never believe what you publish, and never publish what you believe," you know. And it just really, like, it hits you what kind of film that you're watching here. And
I like what his boss says when he's talking about the guy and he's killing. And he just slaps the table. He's like, God damn, I hope he kills some more people.
Anything for a fucking story.
Yep.
It's amazing. This is just so... That's what I like about this film so much, Axe, I think, is that it's so true to life. And with media and everything, the media and everything, how our world is portrayed nowadays, like how relevant is this film that came out in 1997? How relevant is this now? Like, it's still relevant.
Well, yeah, the airwaves have changed.
They definitely have, but I mean, what I'm getting at, Axe, is the principle. You know, you still have, the media still has that mentality, anything for a good story.
Yeah, for sure.
And that hasn't changed. So, you know, I'm gonna start things off here for the Night Flier, Axe, and I'm gonna.
Well, wait, man. Let's talk about the vampire a little bit here, man.
Okay.
You know, we haven't even gotten to the meat yet, man.
That's true. We haven't even.
So this vampire is very unique. I really like this guy. It's K&B effects. You know, it's very top notch. This movie's brutal. It's got a lot of gruesome beheading and getting chopped with axes and shit. But this vampire, his face, you know, like it's not at all a typical vampire makeup at all. It looks like a bat, but not quite like a bat. It looks like something else, like a demon, but not like anyone I've seen. It has really weird features. It almost I don't even know how to describe it. It doesn't look like a classic vampire at all, and it doesn't look like, you know, the classic vampire bat even, but it's definitely a take on it that is completely unique. You know, and I like how, I don't know, I mean, you know, he's a vampire, but he's Dracula, you know, and in the end, he's got the cape, you know. That's one great one-liner from the old-timer ginhead guy, you know, that he was interviewing, and he's like, fire engine red, and what is he, blacker than a woodchuck's butthole. Some shit like that, right? And, you know, so he's the classic Dracula cape, you know, and Dracula has to have his vehicle. He's got to have either the cool car, you know, the hearse, or in this case, he's got the fucking cool airplane, you know, and so that's completely classic and style, but I don't know, like the way that he doesn't just bite their necks like a typical vampire with the two little bites. It's this big siphoned thing out of their necks.
Right.
You know, is all completely original and unique. And yeah, this is, you know, when you say this is an underrated movie, I couldn't agree more. You know, like as far as the twist at the end, do I think it's the greatest twist? No, I kind of think it's lame.
Yeah, I have in my notes here, Axe, the ending is extremely underwhelming, which I think, and I can see how it ended the way it did, because it kind of, I got that feel that potentially there could have been more. This film, I could definitely see with the way this film ended, this film definitely having a sequel.
Right, and you know, okay, so Dwight Renfield, right? Is that?
Yeah. Yep.
So he kind of works like the Crimson King does in all the Dark Tower stories, where, or even It, or those kind of stories where he's got this power to influence, and it's this evil entity that influences people to do what they want them to do, you know. And this is just another example of Stephen King doing that, you know.
Yeah. And to one last thing about the actual design of the vampire. The funny thing about this Axe is they don't really hide that either because the fucking design is right on the cover.
Right.
So in this being the whole film really focused on this guy showing his face and all this stuff and this story and everything, and it's blatantly obvious on the cover, and it's a very, as you said, it's a very strange vampire design.
A lot of my favorite movies were that way, though. Leatherface, right on the cover, you get that's Leatherface. Or Demons.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking, you look at the cover of Demons, you know what you're getting with that movie, man.
Right.
The Night Flyers is a lot like that, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. But we'll wrap things up here with the Night Flier, and Axe, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna give this a 3.5. I think this is good enough for a 3.5. It's just, I enjoyed it personally. We always compare apples to oranges. I enjoyed it more than Silver Bullet personally, because I just think it's it's a hell of a lot more gritty, of course, and it's we have that classic. That's why we kind of did this, folks. But we have that classic vampire versus werewolf kind of story. But one is definitely not for kids.
Right.
And so they're definitely, you can't really compare them in that aspect. The family-friendly thing is there. But I'm going to say 3.5, Axe.
Well, I mean, I don't know, dude. I'm just going to say I would put it equal. I'm going to give it a 3. I don't want to say one's better than the other, really, because I like them both for very different reasons. I like the kids in Silver Bullet, especially when I was a kid. I thought that was great. And then now as I'm older, I really love the cynicalness of the story to Night Flier, and so they're very different to me, but equal. So I'll go with 3 on this as well.
Okay, so 1997's The Night Flier. I am going with 3.5, and Axe is going with 3 blood drops on that.